Welcome back. Who will take over the hot seat as Britain's new Prime Minister? Conservative Party members are voting for a new leader after Boris Johnson's exit last month. Voting has closed and the new Prime Minister will be announced by the party on Monday. It seems to be a two-horse race with Foreign Secretary Liz Truss up against former Chancellor Rishi Sunak. But who will win? Let's get the latest from our UK correspondent Olly Barratt. Olly, great to speak to you. What are the pundits saying?
The pundits are saying and have been saying for some time, Anley, that Liz Truss is going to win and is going to be the next Prime Minister. It is either her or Rishi Sunak. We've known that for weeks now because they were the two candidates chosen by Conservative MPs, lawmakers, to go through to the final round. The final round is decided by Conservative Party members, and it's been clear for some time, according to the polling at least, that Liz Truss was more popular with the membership, and it's seemed hard for Rishi Sunak to change that perception and really to catch up the ground that he had to catch up over the course of this summer leadership contest. So if Rishi Sunak won, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, that would be a huge shock at this stage. Many people do feel that it's been clear for some time that Liz Truss, the current Foreign Secretary, will win this contest. And as you say, voting has just finished just over half an hour ago now. But actually, Conservative Party members have been able to vote for weeks, and so most of them had already done so. And what happens now is that those votes, the final tallies, will be done over the course of the weekend. And as you say, that announcement will be made on Monday around lunchtime UK time about who has won the Conservative Party leadership and who therefore is going to be the next UK Prime Minister.
Olly, the new Prime Minister, whoever it is, will be officially appointed by the Queen at Balmoral, the first time such an event is held outside London since 1952. And that's, of course, due to the Queen's ongoing mobility issues. What are the logistical challenges involved in having this kind of an event, a public event or a state event outside of London?
It does make it more difficult, not least just because of very simple and obvious things like travel logistics. What would normally happen in this situation is that the outgoing Prime Minister would go to Buckingham Palace, a short drive from Downing Street. They would effectively resign in front of the Queen, and then the incoming Prime Minister slips in just behind them and has an audience with the Queen at Buckingham Palace and can be back at Downing Street, having been asked to appoint a government by the Queen just moments later. It really is not a very long period of time. Now, getting to Scotland is more complicated, obviously. The outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson will fly to Balmoral to have his audience with the Queen, and then Liz Truss will do so just afterwards. She will then fly back to London and do the traditional speech on the steps outside Downing Street before she goes into number 10 and gets her feet under the desk and does things like meet all these civil servants that'll be helping her in her new role, assuming it is her that wins this contest. So it does just add a little extra complication to things. It means the day is slightly stretched out. So Boris Johnson will make a speech outside Downing Street early on Tuesday morning, and Liz Truss will be making her speech, we think, if it is Liz Truss, around about 4 p.m. local time in London in the afternoon. So it just elongates the day a little bit.
Now, the next general election is supposed to take place in 2024, but that could be called earlier. What's the likelihood, given the situation around the Conservative Party and the way in which Boris Johnson has exited?
All sorts of factors play into that decision, and it's a difficult one because if Liz Truss gets into office, if it is to be Liz Truss, and forgive me for keeping saying Liz Truss, but it does look like it will be her that's the next Prime Minister. If she gets into office and the polls continue to look difficult for the Conservative Party, then you wonder why there would be any reason for her to call an early election. She'll have a couple of years really to try and do whatever she can to change that polling, and she may want to use every single week, every single month of that period to recover ground that the Conservatives have lost in the polls to the opposition Labour Party. Now, there will be pressure on her to call an election because a lot of opponents of the Conservative Party will say, look, you don't have a mandate as Prime Minister, you weren't directly elected by the people, so you should go to the polls. The other further side of that equation is that actually if Liz Truss, if she is the Prime Minister, gets a big bounce in the polls, and if she starts to think actually she might be able to go to the people earlier and really put pressure on the opposition Labour Party, she might be minded to do that and secure her own mandate. But I think a lot of it will depend on the polling, because as in the last recent period of months, Boris Johnson's Conservatives have been a number of points behind Labour in the polls, and you wonder why a Conservative Prime Minister would call a snap election in those circumstances when they don't need to.
So let's talk about reports that Boris Johnson's government retained a senior cabinet minister and aide, despite allegations of sexual misconduct, that making news all across the UK.
Yes, this is reported by Sky News. They have spoken to two women who say that they were assaulted, one by a current cabinet minister and another by an official who is currently a senior official in the administration in Downing Street. Now, Downing Street has responded to this and says that there has not been any investigation opened, any criminal investigation, or indeed any allegations that they know of that have been made to the police. And so they say at this point there's no further action that they're going to be taking. They also point out that anyone who comes into an administration or takes on a senior job in government, like a number 10 official, for example, has to go through a vetting process. So they point to that as part of this calculation as well. But it does come off the back of a series of scandals for Boris Johnson's administration, several of which have involved Boris Johnson's government facing allegations and then being perceived not to act quickly enough on those allegations and then being forced into a U-turn at a later date. So certainly this is a story to keep an eye on. Of course, the added complication to all of this is that Boris Johnson's administration and many of those officials, and maybe even that cabinet minister who is accused here anonymously at this point, they may well be on their way out to different jobs as early as Tuesday, Wednesday next week.
So while we're talking to you, we've got to talk about the energy crisis. Brits are refusing to pay energy bills with a campaign titled Don't Pay UK. Now, we know that energy prices are soaring all across the world, but is there a plan to cushion consumers in the UK?
Well, the government would say that actually it's already rolled out a major programme. £37 billion the government has put in place in terms of support for households up and down the country already, and those payments are being rolled out. But critics of the government say that really isn't enough. More is going to be needed, and rapidly. And critics of the government also say of the Conservatives as a party that this long leadership campaign they've been holding over the summer period has meant that the focus hasn't been on the energy crisis as much as it should have been. It means that whoever does become the next Prime Minister is going to walk into Downing Street with a major crisis on their hands, and they're going to have to act very quickly indeed. What we don't know is exactly what form that further action will take, because both of the remaining candidates in the race have been keeping their cards quite close to their chest on the exact detail of what they will do. It is clear, though, that there is going to be a major further package rolled out at some point in the not too distant future, perhaps as early as this month. But as I say, the government is being criticised for not being able to do more over this long summer period when effectively Boris Johnson's caretaker government has been in place. It's October when the bills, because of price cap changes here in the UK, start to really spike, it's expected, for many people. So as I say, there's not long for the government to be seen, the incoming new administration government, to be seen to be taking some significant action.
Well, thank you very much. That was our UK correspondent Olly Barratt bringing us an update from across the pond.